Hi, my name is Carol Shaw, and I will be teaching at the North Carolina Quilt Symposium this spring in 2019. Here's an overview of my workshops. I will be teaching two fun and fast-paced workshops. The first is the Fibonacci quilt, and the second is the Parisian Curves quilt. And I'll tell you a bit more about both of them in a moment. Both of these workshops are suitable for confident beginning quilters and will provide challenge for experienced quilters. In both workshops, we'll explore the principles of contemporary modern quilt design. And for those traditional quilters out there, these workshops will be a great introduction to help you answer the question, what makes a quilt modern? Also, in each workshop, you'll get complete instructions for piecing the top, as well as interesting options for layouts for finishing the quilt, so you can customize it to your own needs. Let's look at the Fibonacci quilt first. Here's a sample of the Fibonacci quilt that I made a while back. And as you can see, there are 6 blocks which are based on Fibonacci math. They are quick and easy to piece. In the center of the quilt, you'll see this large improvisationally pieced block. If you don't want to piece it improvisationally, I will give you an optional layout for simply piecing it using fabrics that you've used in the rest of your blocks. Now let's look at fabric that you'll be selecting for the Fibonacci workshop. First of all, there are lots of colorways that are available to us quilters, and you can use almost any type of fabric or group of fabrics to make this quilt. There are a couple of things I want to mention though. When you're choosing your fabrics, try to choose fabrics that show contrast and variety. So for example, in this block, you'll see I have one print, and I also have a black and white print, which is very abstract. They're very different prints, but they'll play together well in this quilt. And I've combined those prints with several grunge or marbled fabrics. That is, fabrics that are not quite solid, but they have some texture or slight variety, but they read as solids from a distance. Also, I would like to mention that you shouldn't overmatch your variety of fabrics that you're bringing. So in this second block, you'll see I've used a pretty traditional print fabric, and that's in the larger block. And it's lined up pretty traditionally right on the vertical of the print design itself. And I've surrounded it, in this case, with a group of solids. And all of these solids, with the exception of one, really can be found very prominently in the print fabric. The one that's a little bit different is the one in the upper right-hand corner. And that's kind of a Shaw Ncqsi green, very bright and vibrant. And you might not pick that fabric when you first look at your print, but I encourage you to think about zingers or fabrics that can give you some zip in your design. And above all, if you're not sure, bring a few more choices than you think you will need. A few more choices always makes for a more interesting quilt. The last tip I would give you is to consider bringing a stripe fabric, a modern stripe. And in this third block, you'll see my stripe fabric is pretty closely lined up in terms of the levels of color, and there's a huge variety of colors. You can pick a stripe that has fewer colors. It doesn't need to look like this one. But you see how it plays against the print fabric in the upper left. And my print fabric has all of the colors that you'll find in the stripe. There may be one or two more in the stripe than you find in the print. And then I've paired it with some fairly complementary solids, but they could be mottled or marbles or grunge, of course. The zinger fabric is this yellow. Yes, it's in the stripe and it's sort of hinted at in the print, but it's really brighter than you would find in either one of those fabrics, and it kind of just livens up the whole palette. Now, let's talk about my second workshop, the Parisian curves. In this workshop, you will learn to piece, improv, cut curved blocks, which means you'll be cutting them without any templates, so there's no pinning and no matching involved, and every curve is going to be a little bit different. It makes for a really interesting set of blocks. You'll notice also in this quilt, in my fabric choices, I've used a really interesting print sort of flower, modern flower, and I fussy cut one block so that that flower is just prominently displayed. It really gives a little lift to this quilt. And I've paired it with a variety of other prints, some from a similar fabric line, but most are coming from multiple designers. And I also pieced improvisational borders, and I'll talk about that in the workshop as well. You will get multiple quilt layouts in this workshop as well. So let me talk a little bit more about fabric choices for Parisian curves. But first, I do want to mention that in addition to the single cut curved blocks, we will be making blocks with 3 or 4 layers, like this block in the bottom left. There are 4 layers in this block, and again, all cut freehand, no templates, and no pinning. The other thing I want to mention about these blocks, and I'll show you the quilt in a moment, these blocks are made from modern batiks for the most part. However, I have mixed in some other types of mottled fabrics that are not exactly batiks, but similar in nature and type. When you're looking at the Parisian curves fabrics that you want to bring for this workshop, you can choose either a very coordinated palette, like in my first Parisian curves quilt I showed you, or you can use a scrappier looking palette, like the one here. You'll notice here that I've chosen a background fabric that's pretty saturated in color. It's a really bright yellow with some texture in it. It's not a solid, although I could have used the solid. But the main reason I want you to look at this is because you want to choose a background fabric that will give high contrast to your curved patches, the blocks in your curved blocks. You want those curves to really pop out, to show up very boldly as you're making the quilt so that people can admire your cutting and piecing. Now, there's another option for the curved blocks and the fabrics, and that's in this second quilt, which is more of a patriotic colorway, red, white, and blue, basically. And yet this quilt is, I think, pretty interesting because I used a blue ombre fabric as my background fabric. Just like I used yellow in the first quilt, this one has blue. And this ombre, you can see in this bottom border, goes from dark, dark blue to a very, very pale blue. And then on the other side, it repeats going from pale to medium to dark again. And when I cut my patches, I cut them out of different areas in the ombre strip. And that gave it movement and light and dark, high contrast and medium contrast, as well as low contrast. So all of these blocks ended up looking far more interesting with this ombre background than they might have with just a solid blue background. And as you'll see in these curved blocks, there's some with multiple curves. I think this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 patches there. And we'll also play with making small curved blocks. And again, they're just as easy to make as the larger blocks as well. So lots of variety, lots of fun in both workshops. And I hope that you can join me for the North Carolina Quilt Symposium. Here is my website here on the bottom. And if you have questions, you can contact me through my website on the Contact Me page. And here is the website for the North Carolina Quilt Symposium. I hope to see all of you in May 2019. We'll have lots of fun. So take care and have a great day quilting. Bye-bye.